What keeps you awake at night?
Sea levels are rising globally.
Fears fueled by horror stories.
Among the worst flu season in a decade, and it hasn't peaked yet.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous.
Another series of deadly terror attacks.
I don't want to be blamed if you cannot get to sleep tonight.
Hello.
Oh, okay, welcome. My name is Olivia.
My name's Brooke. I'm back.
And I'm Bree.
Okay, guys.
Hello.
We usually love to get a little intimate and introduce ourselves and talk a bit, but I mean no exaggeration when I say this is the longest episode I've ever written.
Oh, God.
So we're going to get right into it.
Welcome to our CIA thing series.
So, we are doing our next heavy hitter series, which is on CIA coverups. And we are very excited. Olivia has literally been driving herself insane.
I have
it's been
ruined
pretty
my
bad.
Christmas break.
Jesus.
When Christmas break was over, because finals was brutal, I was literally studying 16 to 18 hours a day for like a week straight. Rip. And I was like, it's okay, like, once it's over, and, like, I'm not worried about anything else, I'm just going to dedicate all my time to this, and I was not exaggerating, because I have read over 300 pages of official CIA documents in researching this. It took me 4 days alone to get the background historical information done. I want to die. So, I hope that this topic also makes you want to die, because it's going to be sad. It involves oppression, slavery, and a little bit of a Holocaust. So,
Just a little bit?
just a little bit.
A small Holocaust, if you will.
Oh, good God.
I appreciate
Please
it.
don't write me letters.
That's the title
don't
of the
think
episode.
holocausts
A
are
small
funny.
cost?
No. So,
Shit,
without
this is how I make my entrance back into this show.
You're
Hey
fine.
guys, wonderful to see you. I just thought I'd start with a bit of a, uproar on Twitter. If we will, let us begin with my tale of the 1954 Guatemalan coup.
Ooh,
Does anyone know about this?
no.
Hell no.
Oh, guys, you're in for quite the fucking wild ride.
Okay.
Now, before we even get into the topic, this has 200 years of backstory, which I'm going to thoroughly get into.
Buckle
We're
your
gonna make it fun
seatbelts,
and light.
boys and girls.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I've made it fun because, like, this is definitely very dense, and, like, I know not everybody out there is into history, but I feel like everybody's into history when it's fucked up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
no, I get
super
you.
true.
Yeah, everyone's
Hence,
like,
we exist.
history and the Monroe Doctrine. I'm like, what if I told you it enabled slavery? And they're like, oh, well, hold on. Tell me a little
Say
more.
more immediately.
So, I knew about the U.S.'s interventionist policies for years from, like, documentaries and pop culture.
Sure.
You'd have to be living under a rock to think that the U.S. plays nice internationally. So I knew about this topic in particular from the Michael Moore documentary Bowling for Columbine. And I didn't know the specifics of it until I took a course on the history of neoliberalism, which we'll touch on today. And my teacher talked about this, like, pretty briefly with a specific example. So the topic was actually suggested to me by a friend of mine who reached out to me literally several months ago. It takes us a long time to, like, have a turnaround to do these. Mm-hmm. So he suggested that I do this, and so I framed the entire series that we're about to do out of the fact that he wanted me to do this episode, and he did not disappoint. So when I began this topic, I did not realize how insanely complicated it was.
You guys don't understand, like, throughout the last 2 weeks, we've been getting texts from Olivia that's like, oh my god, guys, this is gonna be the craziest shit ever. Like,
Yeah, I oscillated a lot. Like, I'd be like, guys, this is gonna be fucking wild. And then I'd be like, I don't know, I think, like, I don't want to live on an earth anymore that enables this. And then I'd be like, dude, this is insane. And then I'm like, I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm having a complete fractured sense of self.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so I didn't understand how complicated this would be. Of my 12 pages of bullet point notes that I transcribed into 12 pages of narrative, about 4 out of the 12 pages were just on background before the topic even begins. So let's get right into that. So The area known as Guatemala was originally inhabited by the Maya, and when the Spaniards first arrived, needless to say, that didn't end well.
Is this the small genocide?
No, it's much more recent.
Great.
Pedro de Alvarado, in about 1523 to 1524, invaded. It became a Spanish colony. South America had a few tumultuous politics for several hundred years. So we're going to skip ahead a few times, where Guatemala was subsumed by some other powers once or twice. And now we're in 1839. You're welcome.
Welcome.
And then Guatemala becomes an independent country in 1839.
Yay, independence!
Thank Christ. Forgive my skipping, but I have to make time for much more gruesome stuff.
At the most, this is a 2-hour show, so...
Yeah. So Guatemala began its path to independence actually in 1837 when the country was in complete disarray due to poor economic planning and leadership. Now, the country of Guatemala is crucial for this topic, the economy in specifically. I'm going to say that again. Now, the economy of Guatemala is crucial for this topic. So some background, the Monroe Doctrine, which was passed in 1823 by the U.S., you remember that?
Yes.
It was a clear turning point in colonialism in South America. So by definition, it condemned colonialism and was built upon the fundamental ideas of neoliberalism, which argued that by decolonizing South America, it would enable them to engage in free trade and participate in the global economy, which I think is a very good argument. This was this period was kind of marked by that idea.
Sure.
A lot of people did truly believe that free trade and global interaction would be one of the ways to alleviate poverty. Obviously, you're bringing in income to very poor countries, and you're giving them money in order to improve infrastructure and everything. I don't want to discount that that's a noble cause. Asterisk on that is that there were generally many like neoliberals who did make good points and did genuinely believe that this would improve the global south, which is Africa and South America and other more poor countries.
Right.
It did a lot to impede economic independence of South America. Now, one of the contingents of free trade required by the South American countries was that they needed to remove tariffs and allow the U.S. and other, global North governments to benefit from importing to and exporting from South American countries.
Right.
So this resulted in many countries in the global South to become dependent upon American imports and jobs provided by the American companies. Americans and other countries sought out manufacturing and farming opportunities in the global South because as a result of these economic pressures, it greatly reduced the taxes paid by the companies, it lowered labor standards, and it offered them expanses of land to seduce them into setting up shop because obviously the governments are going to benefit from this increase in wealth in the area, right?
Sure.
So this was a combination of coercion from the U.S., but also corruption within the governments, and we're going to get into that later.
Really good combination right there.
Love that. So jumping back to 1837, state of the economy and quality of living is very poor as a result of like Monroe Doctrine and so many other things we don't have time to get into, which led to Rafael Carrera declaring himself dictator in 1840.
Love that. I love when people declare themselves dictators.
Don't
I think
you?
it's so ballsy.
We
Every
can
time,
just declare ourselves dictator right now.
right?
Hey
Like,
guys,
and
I'm a dictator.
Just letting you guys know, I'm a dictator.
Can you imagine just like going to the White House and being like, "Hey guys, I know that we've done this system for years, but I feel like I could do it better in a dictatorship."
Yeah,
I'm the dictator now. Can you imagine?
pushes aside like the pens and the paperweight on the White House desk, and you're like,
Oval Office.
this is mine now. So, and I will concede, Carrera actually did many good things during his time in office. Former to this, there was a lot of corruption, and specifically, and we're going to talk about this a lot, the Mestizo and the Mayan people were royally fucked by the previous government.
Cool.
And Carrera was Mestizo. So he improved infrastructure, he improved cities, he improved public education, he brought unprecedented economic prosperity to the country, like mad respect for that.
Right.
He led a conservative rule, so yes, he did bring the Catholic Church back into a position of power and made them largely in charge of public education. It's 1840. I really don't think that's too shocking.
Yeah.
So again, he was mestizo, meaning that he had both Spanish and Mayan blood, and brought unprecedented racial stability that after this point I've never seen the likes of again in this country, where he was appointing mestizo and Mayan people to public office, which is awesome. Drawbacks. He did rule with an iron fist, and that was very evident when he appointed himself dictator for life in 1854.
Right.
And after some political skirmishes, his good intentions and positive contributions to Guatemala, it's a mixed bag. But he did not foster the ability of Guatemala to lead itself. So upon his death, isn't that just the way that dictators for life usually are? So upon his death in 1865, the instability and the poor planning of the conservative government he set up engendered a revolution. Which is a common theme. So in
dictatorships? Sure.
Generally them not working out. So again, the system worked really, really well when he was in charge because I think he was very politically minded. Yeah, he had an iron fist, but it was okay for a bit, and then his successor was kind of an idiot. So, 1871, Miguel Garcia Granados and Justo Rufino Barrios overthrow the conservative government and replace it with a liberal regime that lasted several decades. Clarification henceforth. When I say liberal, I think there is a misunderstanding that, like, it's kind of parallel to liberalism in the U.S., which is, like Democratic Party and stuff.
Right.
Classically, I'm using liberal in its classical definition. So that's, the belief in the free market, protecting free trade, kind of parallel to Republican economic policy minus all the religion. There's usually very little religion in classical liberalism. So this is the type of government that was being set up. I just wanted to clarify that because I'm going to do this a lot, and I want to... Moving forward, that's what we're talking about.
Gotcha.
So Granados had a very short time in office of less than a year. 2 years, my B.
Math.
And so Barrios quickly took the helm in 1873 and was known as the Reformer. In 1863, he subjected aristocracy, confiscated church property, enlarged and desecularized public education, and promoted further improvement of infrastructure. Many of these things largely benefited the public, and by that I mean the poor, which is great.
Yay.
But where Barrios largely differed from Carrera was his neoliberal attitudes toward industry. So in 1877, he passed Decree 177, which confiscated communally owned Mayan land to be distributed to coffee producers. So this resulted in a policy where if Mayans chose to stay on the land that they had lived on for hundreds of years, they were turned into a class called colonos, which translates literally to colonist, but contextually and colloquially to squatter. So they were literally slaves.
Cool.
Yeah, like dead ass. Like they were just slaves. The second class was jornaleros habituados. So that's skilled laborers. So those were like indentured servants, essentially, paying off their debts to the plantation owner. Did a lot of reading. Don't know what debts they're talking about. Just a clarification.
My money is on there weren't
slaves.
any.
Yes.
Right.
Jornaleros no habituados were unskilled day laborers that worked with no pay advance. All of these just sound like different names for slavery.
Yeah, it's all slaves.
But all of their
the way
contracts, all of their contracts lasted 4 years. So, not the worst, not great. And so it ensured nearly
better.
free labor for coffee exporters, which was his main intention. He was also responsible for opening up the country to foreign capital because Carrera was very apprehensive about foreign companies exploiting Guatemala. Which is going to be a theme.
You don't say.
So he died in 1885. There were some changes in power, an assassination, and very, very short sets of leadership. So we move forward to 1898, when Manuel Estrada Cabrera takes office. this guy was a dickhead. He moved forward with Barrios' liberal policies, plundered the treasury, repressed the press, imprisoned Mayans and other Indians, and disposed of his enemies.
Love it.
That. Crucial for our topic, though, he made massive concessions to the United Fruit Company, allowing them to acquire vast amounts of Guatemalan farmland and have ownership of the only true port in Guatemala, Puerto Barrios.
Jesus.
Which is kind of fucked, but okay.
What type of fruit are we talking about?
This was like this becomes Chiquita banana. So they were primarily in charge of banana plantations in South America. He also further assisted coffee companies by creating a coffee oligarchy. He was removed from power in 1920. Anybody want to guess?
No. What?
Do you want to guess why?
Oh, I don't know.
Tell
because
me.
he was considered legally insane by the Unionist Party and then died in jail.
You could say he was bananas.
Shut the fuck up, Bree. No, it's actually perfect. I love it. So goddamn happy.
I mean, okay.
The learner becomes the master, truly.
Thank God. All right.
So, stuff, things, an assassination or two. Ta-da, we're in 1931.
All right.
When I skip things, like, I literally have no joke. Like, it'll be like, it went through 6 different people, and I'm like, no, we're not going into that shit. 6 different people in, like, 10 years is too much.
Yeah, we're playing the hits, so...
So back to bananas.
Cool.
Remember when I brought up the United Fruit Company literally a minute ago?
Like 10 seconds ago? Yeah, I do, actually.
So they were established in 1899 as a result of the merging of the Boston Fruit Company with several other banana plantations. This was a merger long in the works, and the owner, Minor C. Keith, began acquiring plantations in 1884. My B. The UFC was instrumental in establishing railroads throughout South America to be used for shipping. They essentially paid for it as long as they were the sole owners of it. So they exist, but at what cost? In Costa Rica alone, Keith secured ownership of 50 miles of railroad track through concessions with the Costa Rican government. He also required 800,000 acres of land and full property rights for 99 years that was completely tax exempt for 20
Holy
years.
Shit! Who is this guy?
That's an insane amount of land.
Yeah.
That's like fucking a lot of Costa Rica, all right?
Yeah. Costa Rica's not that big.
No. So just like context, this is how big this company was.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is like a perfect example of how the trade agreements facilitated by these neoliberal policies at the beginning kind of applied in real life. Essentially, the UFC is coming to South America and say, hey, offer me tax breaks and other perks, and I'll get you jobs here and increase your GDP through exporting. As long as you give me those things, though. That's the most important part of this. And I will concede, this is like, economically speaking, this is a very mixed bag.
Right.
To a degree, it brought these countries an immense amount of wealth. Guatemala probably would not have had the money to afford improving the infrastructure and education of their country if it wasn't for coffee exporting. Yeah, so I'm gonna concede that. I'm not a communist.
Jesus.
Okay. But dark side, of course, is kind of the labor here.
Right.
Fun fact, you know that song, Hey Mr. Tallyman, Tally Me Banana?
Yeah.
That's about the UFC.
Oh.
Yeah. It's about working on a plantation farm. You just want your bananas counted so you can go home.
That's what we all want at the end of the day.
Same.
Just want to count my bananas and go. No, this is fucked up. Yeah, okay.
No, this is
Yeah.
No, it's fucked up.
So for you to consider how big the UFC was, it was the largest employer in South America by 1930 and had a net worth of $215 million at the time. I didn't even do the calculations on that because that's a fuckload of money for 1930. And they had a very vested interest in maintaining a degree of control over their assets.
No shit.
Understandably. So to understand the significant relationship between the UFC and Guatemala, we have to move forward to the Ubico administration. Now, do you remember how I tweeted that I've been reading articles on human rights violations all morning?
Yeah.
This is the section that we're at right now. So in 1931, I know it's Jorge. Yeah, it's definitely Jorge. Jorge Ubico becomes president of Guatemala.
Okay.
So he, like his predecessors, favors liberal policies and continues to improve the economy, balance budgets. He turned their deficit into a surplus, mad props, and he diversified agriculture. So then he promoted the cultivation of bananas, coffee, and corn. So it wasn't just like a coffee oligarchy, which is nice.
Yeah.
I don't believe he was continuing to make Indians slaves in the previous law. I think Decree 177 was repealed at some point. But in 1932, he passed the vagrancy law where Indians were required to work 150 days a year if they worked, by definition, less than 1 5/6 designated Mayan land, or only 100 days if they were able to work more. So essentially, he turned them into slaves again.
When you say Indians, do you mean like Mayans?
It includes Mayans and then other native populations of South America. I didn't want to just say Mayans because there's a very diverse group of
various
Native Americans
indigenous
in South America.
peoples. Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. In all of the academic articles, they do refer to them as Indians, though.
Interesting.
Because I think it's such a diverse group of people.
Huh.
And it doesn't include mestizos. It's a completely separate class.
Gotcha,
Mestizos actually in Guatemala are referred to as Ladinos, which is the specific type of mestizo in Guatemala. Fun fact.
Cool.
So,
Good to
yeah,
know.
so I'm saying Indian, it's mostly Mayan, but there are other indigenous people within that group.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Want to qualify, and since they're saying in academic articles, I'm going to say that's probably appropriate for all dis. So, legalese translate to all the landless poor Indians were forced to work for an employer. Love that.
Cool.
It was argued that this would give an opportunity to the poor to work, but this was forced labor in disguise.
Yeah.
We can all see that.
All right.
We're not dumb. Another thing that was done was they were forced to work through incarceration. So, the police would make rounds and arrest Mayans and other Indians for seemingly arbitrary reasons. In order to pay off their fines, they would have to work because they were
familiar.
poor.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
How that sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
Get woke.
So, obviously they're poor, couldn't afford to pay it off, so they had to work to pay off their debts. Racial tension escalates when laws were passed in April of 1932 that allowed landowners to, quote, take measures to protect their own land, which is legalese for if you kill a Mayan laborer, you can get away with it.
I wonder why that raised racial tensions. That seems weird.
Yeah.
Good lord.
He also banned unionization, and even banned the word sindicato, which is Spanish for union, because it had communist implications. So there were many more ways the UFC was exploiting workers with the consent of the government, essentially not paying them a living wage, not providing them with adequate food supply. They'd say sometimes they'd go to the food store and there just wouldn't be enough food there. Love that.
Neat.
Sometimes their houses didn't have running water for days, or they'd only turn on the running water weekdays and turn it off on the weekends. And if you were working at part of the port, the work there was highly irregular. They'd ring a bell, and if you were there too late, no work. Sorry. All this culminated to a revolution from 1944 to 1954.
It's a long time.
Now, when was the coup again? It was in 1954.
Right.
Okay.
We're here.
Remember that.
We made it.
So, revolution began in the early 1940s when university students and working professionals were hoping to establish a government within the nationalist framework that would help modernize Guatemala. So one big push towards the revolution was obviously the coffee plutocracy, and that played a big part in oppressing the working class. In response to the rumors of revolution, Ubico banned free speech on June 2nd, 1944, and was forced to resign the next day.
Question. Can you imagine pitching that? Just, hey guys, so tomorrow I think I'm going to ban free speech.
Here's my plan. No more free speech.
Yeah, isn't that fucking insane?
Fuck that. I've never, that's just,
the fact that the government was yeah, you're gonna have to go, guy.
Yeah.
I like
you're
that
gonna
it
have
got
to go.
so far as him making the announcement, though.
no more free speech, and they're like, yeah, you know what? I think we gotta take.
What are the government officials in the back going?
So big transitionary movement in this revolution, however, is that Guatemala finally, for the first time in history, democratically elected their first president.
Yay!
Jose Arevalo.
There we go.
All of the leaders up to this point have not been elected.
Round
So
of
what year is
applause.
this?
This is
1954?
1944.
Okay.
So essentially everybody, it's like, okay, you're appointed now, or you're my son, so you're going to be in charge now.
Right.
Shit like that. First time.
Thank God.
First
okay.
time.
Okay.
Yay.
Love that. So Arevalo did some radical things for Guatemala. He established social security system, encouraged the formation of labor unions, and established a favorable labor code.
Right.
He rewrote the constitution, abolishing the vagrant law and other oppressive measures to the Mayan people.
Nice.
Notable additions were Article 91, which protected personal property, and Article 92, which enabled the government to expropriate land for national interest. Remember that one, okay?
Yeah.
So, new government was built upon strengthening of labor unions, so they transferred power from military to public, which is, again, awesome. And then immediately reinstated the freedom of press, which was not allowed before him getting into office. Now, his big move was this was a turning point in the Guatemala independence movement, was passing a labor law in 1947 that protected workers and implicitly targeted the UFC. Mostly a U.S. company. So this affected profits.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. I literally have uh-oh in my notes because I knew
God.
that you were going to say uh-oh. So the U.S. had big issue with Arevalo not openly supporting communism, but tolerating it.
I wonder why.
During the Cold War, this was kind of a big deal.
Right. Oh, God.
So now, after Arevalo's term was over, Jacobo Arbenz was elected into office in 1951. When was the coup?
54.
54.
So when he entered into office, the Guatemalan economy was flourishing. It was one of the wealthiest countries in South America and had the largest GDP, second to that of Costa Rica.
Oh my God.
Shout out.
It also had the strongest currency in South America, period, and it was equal in worth to the U.S. dollar, which actually is insane.
Dollar bills, y'all.
Shut up. Oh my God.
All right, Olivia, it's fun recording in the same room as Olivia because I get to see how disappointed she is in my commentary.
Yeah.
All right, continue.
So a major reason for the robust economy was, of course, the benefits that the multinational companies like UFC were bringing them. It was a big source of, like, jobs and, taxation and everything like that. Arbenz, however, had intentions to address the wealth inequality that I'm sure you can imagine was happening in this country. More specifically, he intended to redistribute arable land to the poor and disenfranchised. So as it stood, 2% of the population controlled 72% of the arable land in Guatemala. Of that land, 12% was actually being cultivated. So it was just owned. Nobody could use it, but they weren't using it.
I love that. I love
Really
the
cool.
idea of it's like, well, you have a majority, a vast majority of the. No, it's just for me. I just
for
want
the
it in my
aesthetic.
pocket.
Right.
Nice.
Bullshit. So in the neoliberal schema, this would make Guatemala largely independent upon imports, right? Which is a common phenomenon in the global south. These northern companies will come in, they'll take all the land, and then so as a result, since peasants can't they can't grow food and provide for themselves and get money, they have to buy things because they can't grow food, right? So this is working really well for them because not only do U.S. companies have most of the land, but they also, everybody has to buy from them.
Yes.
Double money time. So on June 17th, 1952, the Arbenz administration passed Decree 900, known as the Agrarian Reform Law.
Okay.
So to get into legal definitions, it entailed redistributing land when a single entity owned more than 223 acres of land. So everything in excess is up to be redistributed.
Gotcha.
This wasn't immediately taken away, so essentially if you desired land, you had to apply to receive the land and specifies whose land you were seeking, and the government would process your papers and reallocate it based on how big your family was and everything like that.
Interesting. Okay.
So this led to anywhere from 1.2 million to 1.4 million acres of land being expropriated by the government. It has been insanely difficult to study the effects of this policy, especially because it's 1952, and when does the coup happen?
54.
Right, so we don't have a lot of data on how it really benefited people, but it was estimated that about 25% of the population received land, which translates to about 100,000 families.
Nice.
So again, numbers are really funky, especially because even in the primary reform and all the analysis, they're using different forms of measurement, either acres or square miles.
Right.
Yeah, it's in hectares and everything. But best guess that I can do from reading several economic papers on this is that no one is in agreement about how it positively benefited the economy. One big argument that does have a lot of evidence is that mestizo people were the ones that largely received the majority of the land. Mayans and Indians generally received very little in comparison.
Interesting.
So yeah, the mestizo were still kind of a disenfranchised group. That's not a huge negative. It's just proportionally the people who needed land the most and who had it confiscated from them in the first place weren't getting land. So while wages did increase, cost of living also increased. So it's hard to say whether this necessarily alleviated poverty.
Yeah.
And the economy, at least agriculturally, was very stable. So like prices of certain exports like went up and down every month. And it was really hard to say if this measure could have been beneficial because, again, it was only around for 2 years. Why was it only around for 2 years? Thank you for asking. One important term of the expropriation was that landowners would be financially compensated for the land that they would be expropriating with government bonds that would be repaid over 25 years at 3% interest, which is a lot of money, right? The price of the land was what owners reported it be worth in their taxes.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay? So re-enter the UFC, and over the past couple of decades, the UFC had acquired 42% of Guatemala's arable land.
Jeez.
One company, 42%. As it was, they were pretty annoyed with the policies that improved working conditions for their laborers and pay.
Right.
So they're not happy right now. And now to reiterate, they were expropriating unused, uncultivated land.
Right.
So land that is otherwise, again, not being used. I just want to be clear on that. Because they falsely report it being far undervalued so that they wouldn't have to pay high taxes on it, right? So when the governments of both Guatemala and the U.S. were asking how much the land was worth, that 42% of land, they calculated, they were like, it's anywhere from 600,000 to 1.185 million. Hard to see why, again, the research is fuzzy, but it's somewhere in between there. The important part is that when the Guatemalan government said, hey, based on what you've reported on your taxes, this is how much you said the land was worth, they went, no, we want $15 million for all that land.
No.
All right.
So then, when the Guatemalan government was like, the fuck, the United Fruit Company spent $500,000 lobbying Congress to do something about the, quote, communist invasion of Guatemala. So this is where the CIA enters. All right.
Love that.
Here we go, boys. PB Fortune was the name of the covert operation that would overthrow the Guatemalan government in 1952.
Catchy.
The program was created with full knowledge of the right-wing dictators of Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and Venezuela, as well as the UFC. So I've read the CIA documents, and let's get into the details. CIA had plans of applying economic, political, and psychological pressure to Guatemala, and specifically had plans to use psychological warfare to publicly discredit the government globally.
Hey, Olivia, what the fuck does that mean?
Let me tell you, Brooke, because it's fucked up. So they intended to weaken the military by, quote, infiltrating the infiltration of men capable of spreading rumors to all key military installations with special emphasis on the army garrison of the capital city. Tasks for Rufus, 2nd of September, 1953. So Rufus is code for Carlos Castilla Armas, an exiled military officer, and the U.S. choice for the leader of the new government. As stated in the introduction of the PB Fortune papers, the purpose of this was, quote, the urgency for effecting change in the government of Guatemala while effective opposition still exists and before the cancer of communism has spread and established itself more firmly in the hemisphere. This is further aggravated by the approaching coffee harvest and the concurrent necessity for at least threatening some economic pressure before this year's crop is sold in December. While other action will be necessary, it is recognized that only through military action can a new and stable government friendly to the United States be established promptly. Jesus. CIA released secret document on PB Fortune 1st of September 1953. So essentially, they were worried about crops, and they just wanted a government that would be a little more conducive to U.S. business.
And not spread the cancer that is communism.
Just want to be clear on the intentions of this, okay? The PB Fortune plan was authorized by Truman, but the agency soon found the plan was too widely known, even though the information was highly classified.
Yeah.
And as a result, the plan was scrapped, and the U.S., didn't want to be thought of as an interventionist, especially considering them voicing neoliberal policies of decolonization and everything like that.
Right.
I don't want to be known as a thing that I am.
God forbid.
Yo.
So, however, Eisenhower authorized a similar plan titled PB Success to be executed in 1954. The purpose, as stated in the introduction of that one, is this project represents a historical departure from the international tradition of the United States government and was the first positive successful measure short of direct intervention to thwart the aggressive actions of the Soviet Union in the era known as the Cold War. 16th of November, 1954.
Okay.
So this was explicitly stated, even though it wasn't supposed to be an interventionist policy. It's an interventionist policy.
Right.
There
And it was done in a way to, quote, maintain plausible denial of the United States participation. With a budget of $3 million, which is $28 million today, thanks for asking.
That's a lot of money.
The CIA set off to derail the Guatemalan democracy, and it was a 6-part plan described in 238 pages, all of which I read. So we're going to go step by step. Stage 1, staffing.
Oh my god. She just looked at me and just smiled and laughed.
So essentially this whole thing was picking people and an analysis of the country.
Sure.
Summary of this whole section, quote, the present power structure of Guatemala rests on 3 pillars of ideology, a disciplined minority to implement it, and pure physical force. It is evident that PB Success must crack each of these columns while simultaneously building up an ideology, disciplined minority, and military force of its own. Love that.
Okay.
So a lot of stuff was very opinionated statements, and I've kind of elected to omit some of them because in reading all of this, it was very clear that there was a spin in these supposedly objective documents. So I'm just going to do like literal things that happened, but not their opinions on them being like a communist regime, because that's bullshit.
Right.
Stage 2, preliminary conditioning. So there were many steps in this section. The first describing character assassination that would take place against key targets, including Arbenz. Mm-hmm. Next was discrediting the target at home and abroad through dissemination of anti-communist propaganda. Much of this was done by capitalizing on anti-communist factions in Guatemala. They would demonstrate the inability of the target to best represent the wills of the people. To quote, the theme will be presented in such a manner to preclude any rash public outburst, but it will be firmly fixed in the public mind for later exploitation.
Dope.
They wanted to create hope and patience among the non-communists, especially as they would be depending upon them to do a lot of the legwork.
Sure.
And the groundwork had been laid for this previously, but they continued to create military agreements with Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador. As I said previously, all of these governments knew of PB Fortune and were on board with PB Success, as they were all liberal governments very much in support of multinationals operating out of their countries. They would withdraw military personnel, I would assume create a degree of instability with less resistance, might be. They also specified in the document that no reason or warning would give for the withdrawal of U.S. troops, which executes some kind of psychological pressure on the government right?
Yeah.
And it would begin economic pressure by relying on companies to pressure them internally and other governments to cause strain. They began training paramilitary forces in neighboring countries of Castillo because they wanted him to take control. Very important to note that they did not want this to escalate to violence. The paramilitary was literally just more of a threat that it exists rather than a means to do something violent.
Right. Okay.
All this began on January 1st, 1954. Soon after the Guatemalan government learned of this, they published the White Papers, which they claimed that the governments of the North, in conjunction with the UFC, were working against Guatemala to infringe upon their sovereignty. They correctly identified Castillo as the military leader and offered to produce solid evidence of their claims. Again, we know now the White Papers were correct, right?
Yeah.
However, did the world believe them?
Nope.
Nope. The U.S. immediately gaslighted them, claiming this was all an elaborate conspiracy and they had no evidence of their claims. They regarded the White Papers as communist propaganda to discredit the U.S. and were swiftly ignored. Government was aware that this movement was coming from anti-communist circles, so several arrests of anti-communists were made by the Guatemalan government. This only further solidified the U.S.'s argument that they were paranoid and pro-communist. The evidence was provided by the Guatemalan government, but they were alleged to be forgeries, which further delegitimized the regime. It was already evident that the CIA-backed propaganda was working. In an article from Patricia Nueva on the 28th of January, 1954, they argued that the U.S. was unfairly depicted as an oppressor in propaganda. They also claimed that anti-communists across the country were being persecuted and that university students were tortured by the police. I have no evidence to confirm or deny this.
Okay.
I have looked everywhere for some shred of evidence to either confirm or deny this.
Usually if there is shreds of evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty
Got
easy
it.
to find.
Literally
Can
the
you
only evidence I
imagine?
have were from articles saved by the CIA in documents. So I only assume it's propaganda that isn't true.
Right.
Someone
keep
had
this
to
in
write
mind.
this stuff up and then send it out, get it into the public. Someone had to keep that on their conscience, just lying blatantly.
Well, I believe Patricia Nueva and a lot of the other ones that I'm going to cite are actually all anti-communist magazines, so I think they were all orchestrated and written by CIA agents anyway.
Well, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. The CIA had to do this. This isn't. And
But
when I
it's
say
to
the
stop
CIA, it's so
communism,
easy to,
Brooke.
right, the cancer of communism. But when you say the CIA, it's so easy to depersonalize it because
Yeah,
it's
no,
the
it's people
CIA.
for
These
sure.
are people who did this.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Despite the lack of support globally, Arbenz began suppressing anti-communism and strengthening the propaganda efforts in order to counteract the U.S.'s propaganda efforts. He began strengthening his paramilitary forces and the Guardia Civil, and the CIA claimed that there was evidence that the country would soon become a denied area, i.e. a hostile and repressive environment. One big mistake made by Arbenz was that in an effort to arm his military, he tried to purchase guns from Western countries such as Britain.
Uh-oh.
They and other countries refused, so he purchased guns from Czechoslovakia, which was an openly communist country with ties to the Soviet Union. Put a pin in this, because we're going to come back to that.
Yeah.
Stage 3, build up. So at this point, the CIA had set up several anti-communist radio stations to broadcast anti-communist propaganda. It was evident that tensions were rising as one of the stations in a classified location was attacked and burned down on the 22nd of April by masked men. It was not determined to be anyone associated directly with the government, but the station was very close to government buildings. So if they wanted to stop it burning down, they totally could have, but they didn't. In response to the numerous...
It's burning. What a disaster.
Oh, no. In response to the numerous anti-communist radio stations spewing propaganda, as of the 30th of April, the government required that all radio broadcasts be pre-recorded and approved by the Director of Information before they aired. Not good. For the stage, there are numerous steps involved, but I'd rather go into chronologically. So the stage really took effect after May Day, which is May 1st and celebrates International Workers' Day. The CIA documents claim that the speeches gave by the government officials had communist overtones, remember that claim, And their response was the following. So usually on May Day, there are no radio stations that broadcast. It's a day off for everybody. So the CIA sent messages to newspapers saying that at specific times and frequencies, a radio station would be broadcasting music to celebrate Guatemalan culture. So people tuned in to find that instead of the music, the Voice of Liberation aired, performing character assassination and spinning May Day as a largely communist gathering. Purpose of this broadcast, whose source was never found by the government, was to make it appear as if the anti-communist movement was expansive and well organized, when in fact it was very small and led by CIA operatives. What listeners didn't know was that the CIA had been writing those scripts that were broadcasted over the past couple months from Florida. So it was also during this time that the 32 campaign took place. So the 32 campaign was started and led by the CIA and consisted of operatives posting the number 32 across the country to promote curiosity in the public, right? Because nobody knew what that was. They would ask, they would find out about the revolution. The 32 was in fact chosen by the CIA and was meant to represent the 32nd article of the Constitution that forbade the formation and the functioning of political organizations of an international or foreign nature. So this wasn't like revolutionaries creating this symbol to unite. The group of CIA white men literally sat in a room and said, what is the best symbol to create unification between a group of people?
This is so unadulteratedly evil.
Yeah. Again, this was entirely designed by the CIA.
Cool.
It was an organizing strategy by the CIA and was appealing to give like an unknown symbol and give the illusion of solidarity, right?
Okay.
Press coverage of the situation escalates, as evident from an excerpt of the following article. And I would like you to think of the parallels in the direct quotes of the CIA documents, okay? Can a country be free when it sees itself involved in a communist conspiracy which is leading to its ruin? Can that nation be free which sees all the strength of its youth led astray and wasted by communist doctrines? Can that country be free where its public institutions are not in conformity with its constitutional institutions? Can that country be free where justice is meted out of a system of watchwords? Can that country be free which sees part of its free and wholesome youth scattered among the fields of Central America without direction and without country? Can that country be free in which its youth is rotting in the stinking cells of a filthy and unjust jail? Can that country be free whose laws are trampled by Congress and delivered over communism, except for a small group of honorable men? Can that country be free whose economy is gasping its last breath while Guatemalan puppets of the Red Master give a horrible burst of laughter? Ultimas Noticias, 12th of May. Now, did everybody else hear the parallels to, quote, not serving the will of the people, weakening its economy, performing character assassination? Like, it's literally copy and paste, right?
Right, yeah.
Isn't that
right.
insane? My jaw dropped when I read that, because
Yeah.
I realized that that was literally a copy and paste of their intentions.
I'm gonna cry.
Right?
Like,
you're not even gonna cry yet, bitch. You have no fucking idea
you
what's
better
about
hold
to
those
go
fucking
down.
tears back.
You only have
Push those
so
tears
many.
back in.
So
What the fuck?
Are you fucking my
pretty?
ass?
fucking
Are
your
you fucking my ass?
I understand that we're labeled as a comedy show,
But are we?
but are we? When was the last time we were fucking funny?
If anybody can remember that, please tweet us.
Give us a tweet. Jesus.
I just want to make it clear that the government is fabricating news stories. I just want to emphasize that.
But why?
So on the 26th of May, the CIA performed a leaflet drop in Guatemala City.
Boy.
So that means they took a helicopter, went over Guatemala City, and dropped leaflets that encouraged citizens to rise up against Arbenz and support Castillo.
Can you imagine how terrifying that would be?
Yeah, dude, that's fucked up. That's not even the worst part, but that's fucked up.
Yeah.
This caused more of a great stir in the government because it was meant to suggest that the anti-communists were more well-organized than they
Right.
thought. That's the purpose of this. This was a very small movement of people headed by mostly either government-appointed people or literally CIA operatives. But they
Right.
wanted it to seem like this was a global, like, uprising against them, right? There are also external pressures being applied to the situation. As early as April 4th, the Archbishop Rosel E. Arellano wrote a pastoral letter which vilified the communist government of Guatemala and gave anti-communists moral reason to oppose Arbenz and his regime, because it was the Archbishop.
Right.
So on May 20th, Nicaragua broke diplomatic relations with Guatemala. Guatemalan also shot itself in the foot with PR with Honduras. There was a labor strike in Honduras against the UFC. And while their demands were supposedly, according to the CIA, seething with communism, the protests were condemned by the U.S., El Salvador, and Nicaragua. Guatemala, however, openly supported the workers and encouraged them to keep fighting, as is consistent with their policies. But of course, that was just more ammunition to say that they were a communist country and tough. Now, to go back to the argument of Guatemala being supposedly communist, a large reason that liberal countries believed their countries were communist is that labor rights were seen as parallels to communism. So labor rights and unionization was tantamount to a communist revolution.
Cool.
Love that. Stage 4. Critical period. So at this point, the public and the government are pretty panicked. In reality, the paramilitary and the Guardia Civil would have been completely capable of beating Castillo's paramilitary. But the spreading of rumors throughout the Guatemalan paramilitary was effective and caused a lot of infighting, and thus weakening the support of Arbenz.
This is crazy.
The document, they say they are completely okay with spreading false rumors within the military to create, like, tension. Okay?
I think we just need to nail down here that there are no ethics.
All fake. Yeah, this is all fake. They're like, yeah, we can lie. That's fine. Love that. So in fear of a potential attack, people began booking flights out of the country to avoid war. Parents began keeping their kids indoors, and people already seeking asylum at foreign embassies on June 1st.
Go figure.
People were hoarding food to the point where food prices were rising, further worsening the situation. And in an attempt to control some of the panic, the government released an announcement to the press that they were to report no false stories or rumors, and that if they needed information about the situation, they'd be entirely truthful. While I understand that they were trying to control the CIA infiltrating the news with their falsehoods, they essentially asked the press to participate in voluntary censorship, which is not going to work.
Nope.
So things really escalated after the 8th of June when Arbenz announced that all constitutional liberties would be suspended. Not his best.
No.
And the following day, he was given an ultimatum to break with communists or resign. Now, I also want to clarify that I don't agree with his actions, but everything that he is doing is the result of the U.S. intervening.
Right.
And then otherwise, I don't think would have happened because he wouldn't have been afraid of a revolution and violence. Going out on a limb. Also, the fact that people are panicking and they're monopolizing them, that is fucked. But so there were reports released on the 12th of June that anti-communists were being arrested and tortured. Again, I don't know how much of this is true, but they do have 3 solid examples that worry me. So Alfredo Abularak Sabaz was an anti-communist leader, committed suicide while being interviewed with the police. That's suspicious as fuck. Another anti-communist, Perfecto Villegas, was found in the street near death after being run over multiple times by a vehicle. He soon died, and the police claimed he'd been in a car accident. And then on the 14th of June, Gabriel Martinez de Rosal was an anti-communist journalist, and he was tortured to death in Guatemala City.
Oh my god.
So these were confirmed deaths.
Right.
So this isn't propaganda. But there were rumors spreading that this was rampant and people were being arrested. I have no idea of confirming this. I have tried so hard, and I have no evidence other than the CIA documents. So, grain of salt on how widespread this was. In an attempt to bring Guatemala some peace of mind, Arbenz called a public gathering to discuss the situation on the 18th of June. After receiving threats from anti-communists about holding the gathering, by anti-communists I mean CIA, the event was canceled after thousands of people arrived at Guatemala City.
Oh no.
Here's something fucked up. To cause pandemonium, the CIA flew helicopters over the city and shot machine guns into the air to freak people out. And they also strategically bombed areas of the city to cause minimal casualties, but to freak people out.
Minimal.
Yeah.
How many casualties was that?
I don't know. It wasn't listed.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So this created absolute chaos. And at this point, surrounding countries were aware that Arbenz had purchased Soviet guns, which is exactly what the U.S. wanted them to do.
Yeah.
Because it just reaffirmed that they were communist.
Right.
And then Honduras pulled out of a previously made non-aggression pact, and other countries used this as ammunition to accuse him of being a dictator. I want to read the plan verbatim from the CIA documents so you can see how calculated this was. The plan verbatim was to apply maximum economic pressure, accentuate divisionist activity within the target, intensive rumor campaigns simulating fear of war for the purpose of drawing enemy forces away from the capital, constitutional revolutionary forces claim support of the people, paramilitary forces in readiness, passive sabotage imminent. Stage 5. Showdown.
Showdown?
Also, I'm reading this verbatim. That is what they call this.
Oh my god.
Arbenz pleaded for aid from...
Whoa.
Yes.
The CIA called it that.
Yeah, they called it Showdown.
Uh-oh. Hey, man, listen. I'm not a fan.
So
we
the
really are, like, the
evil.
U.S. Like,
Evil.
oh my god. I
Evil.
can't formulate a coherent thought. This is insane.
This
Yeah,
is insane!
This is really fucked up.
So, Showdown. So Arbenz then pleads for aid from, I believe it's some kind of board that consists of a lot of global North powers. And they asked for help and aid to alleviate the situation and ensure safety of Guatemala, because obviously things are going awry and people are getting hurt.
Right.
So Britain, France, and the Soviet Union all voted in support of helping them.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, but the...
America vetoed it on the 24th of June, so fuck them.
That shouldn't be possible.
So Guatemala City had been mostly abandoned out of a fear of attack, and Castillo's paramilitary acquired the city with ease. Jesus. On the 27th of June, Arbenz steps down from office and flees the country, where he remains the rest of his life in exile.
And there
also,
was no threat.
I think it is so important for me to stress the point that if the paramilitary stayed there and was unified, they would have defeated Castillo's troops.
Yeah. So
they strategically created fear to weaken the city so they can just take it with ease.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there was no real threat.
No, it was a rumor. There was that's what's insane to me, is there was never really a plan to kill anyone. They never wanted to kill anyone or cause bloodshed, but they wanted everybody to think that.
Right.
The plan verbatim from the document, if I may, implement aggressive sabotage plan against key targets. Constitutional later, it claimed capability to seize power by force and issues ultimatum to target regime to capitulate in order to avoid needless bloodshed, which again, I would like to remind us, would never have happened, but whatever. Populace is told to await target regime's reply and further instructions from constitutional leader, secure position and restore order, was the exact verbatim plans for this. Okay. I'll read you just the verbatim Pam on this last part because it's exactly what happened. There was no funny business. Roll-up of communists and collaborators, dramatic proclamations and edicts, formation of government, countries offer support and recognition of new country, U.S. offers support, which is exactly what happened.
Holy shit.
So, on the 8th of July, Carlos Castilla Armas was elected president by the junta, not the people. One of his first actions was arresting and persecuting communists en masse. He executed them as needed. He disenfranchised illiterate voters, crushed labor unions, banned political parties, and disbanded peasant organizations. He burned materials he considered subversive. Most importantly, otherwise this wouldn't be worth it, he restored the land to the UFC and repealed measures passed by Arevalo and Arbenz and making Guatemala
lest we
subservient
forget
to the UFC.
that the entire point of this was not to quash communism, but to give the land back to the U.S.
No, 100%.
companies.
Like, I want to be super clear that this really had nothing to do with communism, and I have evidence of that being true.
They used to use communism as
They
their way
literally
to gut
just wanted to make sure that they wouldn't affect the U.S. Businesses.
Got it.
I could write a whole other episode about his regime in particular and the gross human rights violations that occurred during this era. But one, we don't have the time, and two, I'm already very sad. Good news is that he was assassinated on July 26th of 1957.
One of the rare indications, one of the rare instances where an assassination is the good news.
Good news, he was assassinated.
Yes, so he was in office for 3 years and was responsible for numerous deaths and executions of communists, persecuted his enemies, completely disenfranchised the poor, really fucked up this country, right? So from there it got worse, which I didn't think was possible. Sorry, I'm a little manic. Like, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
So, sorry if this sounds insensitive.
Yeah, we're recording at
exhausted.
8 in the morning. Like,
yeah. I'm just so mad. So it got worse. After he was assassinated, it transferred from power a million times because this was not a stable government.
Sure.
And at the beginning of the 1970s, a 2-decade-long civil war began.
Of course.
Which ended in 200,000 people dying and 40,000 people, quote-unquote, disappearing. And by the time it was over, there were 626 massacres of Mayan villages.
Our country caused that.
Yes, just reminder that the CIA caused this. There were numerous human rights violations and executions leading in this period. During the Civil War from 1981 to 1983, there was a genocide led against the Mayan peoples, known in Guatemala as the Silent Holocaust, because nobody cares. Ugh. And still nobody cares, because I didn't even hear about it until I started reading about this.
Yep, never heard of it.
That was the thing that consisted of 626 massacres of Mayan people. The rate in which they were killing people in April of 1982 alone, the rate of killing was about 111 people per day. So it was estimated that tens of thousands people have died, maybe 20,000 to 40,000. They didn't really keep records because they didn't care about them. So I can't tell you.
Great.
But, far from the numbers, which shouldn't be the important part, the descriptions of the torture and the murderings and it was awful. It's terrible. And a whole different episode. This was a horrible time in Guatemalan history. Civil War ended in 1996. There was still splits of power, assassinations, subjugation. Presidents were tried for corruption and murder of their political opponents. Things have kind of, sort of, maybe settled out today. A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's only been like 50 years.
The current Guatemalan president has given a public apology to the family of Arbenz. U.S. has given, what? No apology. Other than Bill Clinton's meager, that wasn't very cash money of us during his presidency. No, but that's essentially what he said.
Bill Clinton never has some cash money in his life.
No, he came during the Civil War when a dictator who was killing people was in power and was like, that wasn't very cool of us. I'm sorry. Like, that wasn't his exact words, but that's essentially what his apology was, which is fucking disgusting. Money. The Nixon administration regularly visited Guatemala and interacted with their dictators that were actively killing their citizens.
Yeah.
And
Nixon,
no apology, it's fine.
But we believe in freedom for our people, so that's
for our
fine.
people.
Yeah, for our people.
For our people.
The
U.S. did, however...
I made a Smolikost joke earlier. Can I just take that fucking back now?
Yeah, so here's the part that's gonna make you super mad.
No, I'm already there. It's done.
So, what the U.S. did do instead of apologize, however, was fund PB history immediately after the termination of PB success.
Nope.
So, I don't know how it got out, but I think it was globally believed that the U.S. was responsible for the Guatemalan thing, which we know is true now because the documents are released. I'm not quite sure how everybody knew when it happened because it was super duper top secret, right? But it was, it was well believed by foreign governments that they toppled the government specifically for the UFC and U.S. business.
Okay.
And so in an attempt to shift the public opinion and justify their heinous actions, they did PB history to essentially sort through all the documents left by the Arbenz administration and prove that the government was being infiltrated by communists.
What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What
After
the fuck?
searching through 200,000 documents, they found what? Nothing to confirm that. Love that. What they did find was evidence to make a list of known communists which they supervised for decades to come under constant surveillance. But again, did they complete their main objective of proving that this was justified and Arbenz was a communist and that his country was infiltrated by communists? No.
Absolutely not.
It's such a shame that this is an audio medium because
We're all angry. You
Like-
can see all of our faces right now.
Yeah.
it isn't great radio. I mean, the story's enough, but we're not reacting because we're just. My mind is in physical pain.
Yeah, I'm just in shock at this point.
My jaw was dropped about 20% of the time that I was researching this because they'd be like, these are our explicit 6-point plan to disrupt the government. And
Which
then I
was
read a news
flourishing.
article that was point by point exactly what they said they wanted to spread in Guatemala. And my jaw dropped. Or the point where he was like, yeah, I want to give land to coffee plantations. Oh, people are there? I guess they could be slaves. And you're like, huh? Like,
Come again? Well,
so, you know, and the reason I gave the background is to just fully explain the context and why this Arbenz administration and the Arevalo one was so important. It was the first time in history they had a democratic government that supported and represented the people, and the government went, ooh, but bananas? And just ruined their country for 30 years.
But my whole thing behind that, too, it was the first time where it was representing quote-unquote American ideals of like democratic presidents and democratic elections and just
because that's
the
never
right
been
of
the
their
actual
people.
American ideal.
Right, but
No.
that's the thing. Exactly. Okay, fucking shit, my dude. This
People
is...
don't
okay,
know
so-
this.
Right?
It's out
and so
there. The
part-
information is out there and people don't
Yeah, it's
know.
all published now. And the
What?
part that keeps me up at night is not even the event
Oh my
itself,
God.
which is super fucked up, but that this was the cornerstone of U.S. interventionist measures after the quote-unquote success of PB success. They concluded that this was the ideal framework for dealing with discord abroad.
Yeah,
Oh.
I knew that they were that
This
the interventionist
yeah.
thing was like widespread because we had like a whole
This
thing
is where
about
it started.
Holy fuck, dude!
Yeah, they concluded that this was effective, and so this was the exact type of policies that they applied in, let's name them, Iran,
Yep.
Congo, Brazil, Vietnam, and more. We have used this exact framework, which we have concluded to be effective at toppling governments when we disagree with them.
Oh yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I love that
And-
that it was in the fucking article that the entire reasoning for this was because the government in Guatemala wasn't favorable to the U.S. Since when is that the keystone? Like, we need that for governments abroad. I am freaking out.
And I would like to close with a quote.
No.
From an anti-communist newspaper article that I think is just so painfully accurate. Okay? And it is because of this round and painful negative today that there arises a habit of rebellion of the people of Guatemala in October of 1944 when Guatemalan blood flowed in order to destroy one tyranny without knowing that behind it came the other one, much worse, more terrible. Ultimate Noticias, 12th of May, 1954. And that just parallels the argument that they were saying that this government that you fought and died for has brought negatives, so you should fight and die for this new government, which killed 200,000 people. And, like, just that concept of saying that, you know, you died for something that oppressed you, and then being completely psychologically gaslighted and manipulated into having a system of government that committed a genocide and killed 200,000 people, and how that quote parallels to all of the other U.S. interventionist policies that have toppled governments is just, it really fucked me up, because now I wonder what is real, right?
That's
because
the thing. Like, they didn't stand a chance. There was no way for them to know which way was up.
Yeah. Like, that's what's so insane about these policies, is that you don't know what's real. What's real?
The CIA has admitted that there are no ethics when it comes to doing whatever the U.S. wants. So, like, you could turn on your TV and be fed a line from the CIA and you would have no fucking idea.
Yeah. You have no idea. You have no idea what's real. You don't have no idea what's being reported, if it's correctly, if it's being implanted by a government that wants to get rid of you. You have no idea if statistics are real. Apparently, who gives a fuck? And, you know, this was declassified in the early 2000s. You know, a lot of the stuff that's happened, you know, further hasn't been declassified yet. So I'm very interested to see more information on Iran and Congo and Vietnam. And all of them, some of which I think are released. But, like, there's more that's happening. This is still a policy that we do. Like,
it's no, but not only is it a policy that we do, it's a policy that we're like, hey, this really worked out.
Yeah, like, oh, wow, good, reaping the benefits of that one. What?
So, what did we learn?
Olivia,
that you can't trust anyone?
I can't. This is bad radio. I can't even form a sentence. I am enraged.
Yeah.
Like, there's a certain level of, like, behind the curtain, like, when we do these episodes, it's a show. We're talking to each other about these things, and yeah, Brie and I didn't know any of what Olivia did, and Olivia and I didn't know what Brie was gonna do, and so on and so forth, but it's a show.
Yeah.
I cannot maintain that curtain right now. I am fucking furious.
Yeah.
It's just so fucked up. It's just...
I mean, I'm like, it's I'm just, the slow pauses and the silences is, you know, it's bad, because it's just me and Brooke not being able.
Mouth agape. Like, I can't process this. And the worst part is that, like, I was aware vaguely of the whole U.S. interventionist policy thing, because, you know, you can't ignore it. You said at the beginning of the episode you'd have to live under a rock to believe that the U.S. plays nice when governments oppose it, or they...
Not playing nice seems to be quite a loose term now.
But, like, I don't know what I expected, but the blatant acknowledgement of the CIA's own evils, the knowledge that they clearly had, that they were doing something to kill people. Not that they were going to shoot people in the streets, but the goal was, at any cost, make sure the U.S. businesses get their land back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, fuck the country. That's insane.
Yeah, also in the documents, it says specifically that they would like to do this ideally without bloodshed.
Sure.
Not because it's unethical, but because it would make it way more difficult to establish a safe and secure government that would be friendly
baby,
with
that's bad
the US.
PR. God damn.
Yeah, that was literally their reasoning. But they said if it has to come to that, then sometimes it'd be like that.
Ah!
But it's less than ideal, because it makes it way harder to, like, put a secure government in there. So if we could do it by any other means, that would be, like, way better.
Which the government they installed was so secure, as we know.
Yeah. The one that lasted for 3 years, and then...
Fuck, dude.
Brie, what keeps you up at night about this?
What doesn't? Sorry, I peaked my audio.
I mean, I think, you know, it's all fucking awful, you know, and I'm just kind of with my head in my hands, just in disbelief right now. But I think the thing that's really frightening is, you know, this is us. This is where I live. And I've known for a very long time that the U.S. is really fucked up. You know, that we do things that are really problematic, and we like to, like, paint this picture of we're the good guys. but we're really not, and I've known that for a long time, you know? We've all known that. Feel like there's a couple of Americans who, there's a lot of Americans who like to believe that we're great,
the best country on earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Shut
but
the fuck up.
I think a lot of Americans come to the realization that we make mistakes and we've done a lot of horrible, horrible shit. This...
Mistakes puts it lightly.
Well, yeah. This is something where it's not... Because I think that at the end of the day, with this type of shit, the large scale, the grand scale things, it's like, okay, a lot of the time government has to make really horrific and awful choices and things that we don't see as ethical to, you know, protect our country or whatever the fuck, you know, basis they use it as a moral ground to kind of leap off on. But this is legitimately for money. This is just so that we didn't lose some land in a country that we created
that
fear
wasn't
tactics.
being fucking used.
That we created fear
That
tactics.
wasn't being used.
I'm
used.
You know, like Brooke was saying before, you know, we try to create good radio. We try to, you know, be entertaining, but at some point there's just complete silence because we're just in shock, and that's one of these episodes.
This is the worst one. I'm just saying it. We've been doing this for like 30 episodes, I think, give or take. This is the worst one.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to research my topic.
Yeah, don't get into it too late. You gotta space that shit out because I wanted to die a lot.
I'm gonna
I
give
was
it
like,
2
I don't want to
weeks.
live in a world where this happened and this is my country.
I'm gonna set up an appointment with Jeff, my therapist, and just talk it through.
Yeah, I'm very, very thankful, and I want to give, like, you know, credit where it's due, that I took that neoliberalism course, because this was not even on my radar. Like, I knew it was a thing, but I did, like, the quote the teacher gave is, he gave the quote of, like, they estimated that their land was worth 1.1 million, so that's what the Guatemalan government offered them, because that's what they said their land was worth, and they denied it, and asked for 15 million, and then overthrew their government. And this was in a section where we were just talking about all of the things that the U.S. government has done to maintain neoliberal policy and free trade, and there's so much more. That whole class was so sad, and the teacher was so jaded because he's like, you know, because they democratically elected a government that didn't enable the U.S. to make money. Can't have that. And then move to the next slide. And it was such a great class, and Professor Kelly is one of the smartest men I've met, and he's brilliant, and I love him.
Round of applause for this man.
You know, and thank you for putting that on my radar. It's really changed me as a person. This whole topic has, but like that class and like understanding the impacts of neoliberal policy globally and like how it's had horrible effects on people. You know, I would have understand taking some of these, if you were like, we need to do this to China to get Mao out of power. It's still fucked up, but I've been like, okay, well, you know, shitty means to get rid of a guy who's oppressive people actively, and like, but that's not what this was.
No, Guatemala had never been in a better spot.
No, ever.
But because it was losing the United States money, we decided to fuck them over.
Yeah.
I think
it wasn't. That's the thing. It wasn't losing the U.S.
it wasn't.
anything.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I'm really sad.
Yeah.
So listen, I think I was asked last night at a party, why, or if we would ever do anything like positive on our podcast.
Why?
And I went,
What's the name of the podcast? Oh, that's right.
Things that keep me up at night. Not human joy.
And, you know, I went, no, that's not the point. And I think the reason that we do this is to educate ourselves, and this reason right here is because I think education is the only way that we can kind of...
This episode is so fucking important.
Yeah. And so I think as awful and as horrific as this is and how sad I am now, it's extremely important to educate yourself. And I think this is why we do it. So
I wonder how many people know about this, because like
not a lot.
I didn't, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that people didn't, you know, do the research.
I'm sure people kind of know it was bad. Like, I know it's generally known that we staged a coup in Guatemala. Like, I know that's like I just didn't realize it was this just callous. And that's, I can't even, you know, I gave some quotes, but
Yeah.
God, the writing of these CIA reports is so
Oh, yeah,
indifferent to human life.
I'm gonna go back and look at them just for me because I'm insane. So
I can send you the PDF.
sick. I guess
If you like this podcast, please give it a review.
I propose that on the note that Bree said someone asked if we were going to do something positive ever.
Maybe.
My gut instinct is to say no. But after this episode, I propose that perhaps once every few months we do a therapy day.
Do we just talk about positive news in the world?
Because
we just go, kittens.
I
Those
also
are fun.
believe that this is very important. But I don't want this podcast to become a thing where like we and others lose hope in
Oh no. And I think it's
humanity.
not about that. I think
of
it's
course.
right, and I think it's about educating ourselves so we can find some hope in the dark shit. But yeah, we'll talk about how we can alleviate this for y'all and what the best step forward is.
We have mini-sodes coming up soon. We'll make those a little more.
Yeah, we have a mini-sode
I loved
next
our
week.
campfire stories too. It
Yes,
was
and
really
those I feel like those are the cleansers. So let us know what you would like us to talk about, and anything that you find interesting, or anything that you want us to depress you with, or make it at least a little bit better and to educate you on. Like Olivia said, you can leave us an iTunes review, follow us on iTunes, subscribe to iTunes. It really helps the algorithm.
Yeah, listen
Sure
to it
do.
and download it, because that helps the algorithm. Many appreciate. I put a lot of work into this. I'd like to.
You sure did. Mad props to
Oh my
Olivia.
god,
This was insane.
ruined my winter break, man. This really fucked
I
me
see
up.
why.
Do we want to go over social media? You can.
You can follow us on Twitter at TTKMeUp and find us on Instagram with the same name. We do have a website, ttkmeup.com. It connects to our Patreon if you feel like supporting us. We really appreciate it. We got merch on the website as well, which is
We are
pretty
partnered
cute.
with TeePublic, and you can buy t-shirts, mugs, journals, pillows, baby clothes, which I love. And also, we don't really talk about it much, but we have a Gmail that you can send any suggestions or your own
Please
original
send us
writing.
suggestions.
Also,
Please send us
or
suggestions.
stories if you would like us to read them on Campfire Horror Stories. We'll quote you and cite you and like,
Because
you know.
we genuinely look at that stuff and we really want to know what you guys want to hear, and we'll do it. We'll talk about whatever y'all want
Don't
us to
test
talk
us.
about.
We'll do it.
We'll
And that's
fucking, hey man.
that's ttkmeup@gmail.com.
Yeah, we really appreciate y'all being here, and you know, if you want to tweet me and tell me about how this fucked you up, I'd appreciate it.
This is the
This is
Send
a big one.
send some love Olivia's way for doing this for you guys.
seriously. Jesus.
Do we have any other announcements or comments? This was, this is fun.
Well, I wouldn't say fun. I would say wrecked me for at least the next 24 hours, but hey man.
I'm gonna go eat some Raisin Canes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hey guys, we love you. It's been real. Shout out to my man Casey for suggesting this to me.
Thank you,
yeah.
Casey.
Thank
Made for
you.
good radio. I think you guys think it didn't make for good radio. I think it made for great radio.
I think
You
it's
did-
I think it's
you
great.
did
I think it's
amazing.
very interesting. I'm just sad about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I love you very much. It's been real. Deuces.
Bye.
See ya.